Do you want to learn how to build a really cool project using the new React Router version 7 framework? Well, now you can. In this video, we're diving into a hands-on project where you'll create an interactive app to explore country data, from searching for a country to filtering through regions and viewing detailed information at a click. We'll focus on the essential features of React Router version 7, like setting up routes, using loaders for data fetching, and much more. If you want to check out the code, it will all be in the description. Before we dive in, I need to ask you, do you want to learn topics like this one through a hands-on approach and in an interactive way? Well, today's sponsor, Scrimba, can help you exactly with that. If you're getting into React and want to truly understand it by coding along, Scrimba's interactive lessons are perfect for you. Their unique format lets you edit code in real time, meaning that you won't be stuck in tutorial loops where you're just copy and pasting code and really not learning much. I personally feel like I can't just watch a video and learn from it without giving it a go myself, so that's why I think Scrimba will help a lot of you guys. Now, a large part of the material is free, but you can get full access to their library by upgrading to the Pro subscription. If you want to check them out, check out the link in the description for an extra 20% off. Okay everyone, let's get started with our project. Now, I want you guys to open up a folder inside of your code editor. As a preference, I recommend using VS Code for this. As you can see, I already opened up a folder inside of it. And we're going to open up our terminal and run the following command. We want to run npx create react router. Then we'll also specify that we want the latest version of React Router. And we want to put a dot so that it generates our application inside of our current directory and it doesn't actually create an extra folder with our app inside of it. So I'm going to press enter over here. Most likely, if you've never run this command before, you'll get a message saying that you need to install it, and then you just install it and then run this again. But you should see that we get these options. So yes, we do want to initialize a new Git repository so I can post this code for you guys to actually tag along with it. Then we also want to install the dependencies with npm, and as you can see, it will start installing all of the packages in our project. Now we can close this off and we can run npm run dev. This should start a project on the localhost 5173. And if we go there, we can see that, yeah, this is the boilerplate code that is running on the localhost 5173. Now let's start building our project. To quickly go over the folder structure, every React Router version 7 project is going to look the same. So we're going to have all of these configuration files. You can ignore most of them because most of them you won't touch. The only important ones are your TS config in case you want to make any TypeScript configurations, your Vite config in case you're deploying it or deploying it somewhere that needs you to change here or changing the plugins you're using. But as you can see, we are indeed using the React Router plugin, so that is all already configured for us. Also, we will be using Tailwind for this project. Now, as per usual with my projects and my videos, I don't care about the CSS. I did write CSS just because I think a lot of people can benefit from it. So I'm not going to show myself writing all of the Tailwind code in this video, but I will paste it all in the end so you guys can get a visual representation of how this website can look in a nice and pretty way. But again, if you want to check out my CSS, just go ahead and copy all of the Tailwind code I'm going to be writing from my repository. So now that we got all of the files out of the way, our entire project, or the part of the project where we're going to be coding in, is going to be all inside of this app folder. Now, this app folder is going to contain a couple important files. The first one is this root.tsx file, and this is the root of our app. This is where we define our HTML structure and render our entire app inside of this app component over here. Now, as you can see, we have this outlet component that is being returned from this app component. Now, what this is our entire app. So all of the different routes that we have in our project are going to be replacing the placeholder outlet component. So if you want to put things above this, for example, if I wanted to make a navbar, I could just put something above this over here, like I'll make an h1 tag and say hello. And you should see that every route in our project is going to contain that hello message at the top because what is changing is what is below this, which is the outlet component. So let's just delete this over here because that was just for explanation purposes. Now, what will replace? Now, you might be wondering, what replaces this? Well, it's the route that you're in. Depending on which route you're inside of, right now we're in the index route, the most entry point route of our website. Whatever route you're inside of, you want to render a component for that specific route. So that's where React Router obviously comes into place. The routing structure for a React Router version 7 project looks very nice. You just have this routes file over here, and you export a list of route definitions that are going to exist in your project. So currently we only have one route, and it is the index route, which is defined as the index route by using this index function over here. Now inside of this index function, we define a path to the component that is going to render when we are in the index route. In this case, it is a component that comes with the boilerplate code called the home component. Now all of your routes are going to be inside of this routes folder. Currently we only have this home component over here, and all that it's doing is it's just rendering this welcome component, which as you can see renders this entire UI. Now we do want to change that, so let's delete this welcome component. Let's for now just actually replace this with a div saying homepage, just for us to already get a clean slate on our project. And let's delete this whole welcome folder over here. Now you should see that when we go to our page, all we get is this home page being displayed because we're in the home route. So what do we want to do first? Well, we're going to have a couple different routes in our project, and I want to start off by defining them. So the main routes we're going to have is a route for the about page. So I'm going to create an about.tsx file in our routes folder. And inside of here, we have to export our component in a very specific notation. So we're going to say export default function, and we're going to give a name for this. So I'm going to call it about. And we have to use this notation so that the file-based routing that React Router version 7 uses actually identifies this route that we're trying to export. Then inside of here, I'm just going to return a div that is going to, for now, just say about page. Now let's do the same. I'm going to copy this file once more. We're going to make a country route, which is going to be this a route to just display an individual country. So like you saw in the beginning of the video, we're going to make a website, right, which displays information about different countries. We're going to have a page where it's showing the list of countries, and when you click on each individual country, you can get a more detailed information of that country. So this is going to be the component that is going to render that. So I do want to change this to country. And now let's just make the last component, or the last route, which is going to be the countries page, right? Because this is going to be the one which displays all of the different countries as a list. Perfect. Now let's close all of this and let's open our routes.ts file. Like I said, this file is meant to define all of our routes. Even though we created the route files, we need to actually define them over here. So we already have the index one. Let's just define the about one. So to define an extra route, we have to use the route function. And inside of it, we pass two arguments. The first one is the path name to the route. So in our case, to access the about page, it will just be /about. So we just pass about over here. Then we need to pass the path to the component that is going to render when we go to this specific route. So in this case, it's going to be on the routes folder and on the about.tsx file. Perfect. Now we have two different routes that we want to display. One is the country route and the other one is the countries route. But they're a bit different because what I want this to look like is I want both of them to have basically the same path name, but the specific country route is going to have the country name at the end. So in the most simplest form to explain this, I want, for example, for there to be a countries route and it will access the countries component. And then I want there to be a countries with a specific country name at the end of it being passed as a parameter, and that will render the country. So this is what I mean. I want you to be able to go to our URL and then go to the countries page, and this will just show the list of countries. But if you go to countries/Brazil, for example, this will show the individual country with information about Brazil. Now, an easy way to make this work is to actually use a prefix function, which will help us define over here that both routes are going to have countries as their initial path, right? So both of them are going to start with countries. Now I need to pass a list after this and then put both routes inside of it. And we can now remove this and this from the routes because it knows that both of these routes are going to already start prefixed, because it knows that both of these routes are going to start already with the prefix countries. Now, since we're not having to put anything over here, it's kind of like how we defined our index route, because the index route doesn't have any text in it. So instead of using the route function for this one, we can instead just use the index function like we did above. But since this index is inside of the prefix, it knows that the path to render this component is literally just countries. Now, we still use route for the bottom one because we do want to put the country name parameter at the end of it. Now, we're pretty much done with defining our routes. So let's go to our home component over here. I just realized we forgot to delete this import. So you might have been seeing an error message in the page, but now we don't see it anymore. Perfect. Now let's go to our route, and I want to build a small navbar that we're going to use to navigate between the different routes in our project. So let's expand this app component, which right now just renders that each individual page through this outlet component. So to do that, I'm just going to add a div over here and wrap this outlet around with it. And inside of this div, we're going to call a component called the Navbar component. Now we haven't created it yet, so let's create a folder inside of here and call it components. Inside of here, let's create the navbar.tsx component. Now, for now, let's just export default function navbar and return a div. Now, one thing before we start building this navbar, each navbar is going to look different. If you don't want to build the same one that I did in the demo of this project, then feel free to just build yours in a different way. However, some of the elements we're going to be adding, so some of the divs and nav links and stuff, it's all going to be because of the website that I specifically built. So if you want to follow the same structure, feel free to do so as well. So in my case, I need to add a div to wrap my entire navbar around, then another div to define the structure of it, then another div that is going to contain our logo. So if you want to add a logo to your website, you can do it in multiple ways. You can add an image, for example. In my case, I'm actually just going to add a span that is going to contain the word REST and then another span right next to it so that there's no padding or anything. And I'm just going to append the word Explorer. This is the name of our website, and you can see that in the website this is how it's going to look like, but this will have a different color. It's going to look a lot better when we add the CSS. Now we also want to make this into a link, right? Because this is a navbar, we want to be able to click on the logo and basically go to the home page. So we're going to be using this component from React Router called the navlink component, and we're going to wrap our entire logo around with it. This is very similar to like an A tag in HTML, where we can just pass a to property, which is the equivalent of like an href property. And whatever route we put over here, it is going to navigate to that route when we click on that specific thing. So we are already in the home page, but when I click on this, it maintains us in the home page. This is not a good example. Let me go to the about page and let me click on this. You'll see that it will take us back to the home page. Great. Now, let's go below this nav link and let's add a nav tag. And inside of here, it's where we're actually going to have the different links to our pages. So the first link, and we'll use the same nav link component, is going to be a link to the home page, which seems redundant right now because we also have this logo, but some people just don't know that you can click on the logo to go to the homepage. So it's good to have a specific text-based link to it as well. Now the other link that we want is a link to the countries page, and we'll change this to countries, and we can even make one to the about page. I didn't have one in the demo because we're gonna add that in the homepage and you'll see, but we can click here and just make it a link to navigate to the about page. If we go back, you should see that now we have all three links, and as I click on them, we are successfully navigating within the different pages that we created. And one good thing is, now that I have all of the structure done, I didn't write any of the CSS, I'm going to copy and paste all of the Tailwind class names that I did on my demo, and if you want to just copy and paste them, feel free to do so as well. Perfect. As you can see, I just pasted all of the class names, all of the other stuff remained the same, and if we go over here, this is how our navbar looks like. Perfect. I just pasted all of the CSS and the class names, and now this is how our navbar looks like. It looks a lot better than what it was looking before, and it's starting to look like a real website. Now, one thing I want to do really quickly is, by default, you see our page is very dark. It's the background is black. So I do want to come over here to our app.css, and I do want to remove all of this so that we don't have that anymore, and the backdrop is actually white. Great. Now that we got that out of the way, let's go and start building our home component. Now our home component is going to exist in our home page over here, and currently it doesn't have anything. Now when you define a route in React Router version 7, you see that you can export a function called meta. Now this function has to have this exact notation, or else it won't give you the desired results. Now we are going to add some metadata to all of our routes in order for us to keep in par with really good SEO practices and actually making our website in a way such that it would rank highly in search engines. So for example, this is the homepage for a website which you're able to look at countries data. So we can make this title as the name of our actual website. So if we called it REST Explorer, we can make the title that, and you should see that in the page. Now the title of this page is REST Explorer. Now there's more to the metadata. There's a description as well with the name and the content. We can add those as well. We can add here, check out, let me see, check out countries, or country data, or something like that. Welcome to REST Explorer. Now this thing, it will actually only show up, I believe, if it's ranked on Google. So it showed up as a description on Google, or by also search engine bots to check this out. Now I'm not going to go in depth on metadata, but I'm just going to put one for each of our pages so that we actually make use of them. Now in our home component over here, we want to make this page look a little bit nice. We want to have it display on the left over here some sort of information about what the website is, and then a button that leads us to the main part of our website, which is the countries page, and then another button that will lead us to the about page. Now on the right side, I also added a little picture, which I think just adds to the aesthetic of the website. Now to make it look like we had on the demo, I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to add another div inside of here. And then we're also going to add another div inside of this. We're going to add a bunch of nested divs. We're probably going to add another one as well. Now, this first two over here are just to define some structure for our Tailwind styling. But this one over here will represent our entire app. So I'm going to put two divs, actually one next to each other. This is going to be the left side of our homepage, which contains the two buttons. And this one is going to contain the right side of our page with the image. This is how we're going to divide the page into two horizontally, so that we can have one part to show the buttons and the other the image. Now for the buttons part, we do have to put another div inside of here. Inside here, we're going to put an h1 tag that is going to have two spans. So the first one is just going to be some generic title like Explore Countries With, and then the next span is going to be real-time data. So the reason why we're using spans, and I think you understood this from the Navbar, is because with this, we want to have two pieces of text that are right next to each other, but we want to put different styling through them. So when I add my CSS, one of them is going to be kind of purple or kind of blue. I forgot which color I used. And the other one is going to be black. So the reason why we use span is because if we were to use a paragraph tag, that would add some unnecessary margin or padding, and spans don't do that. Now this is our header for this section. So below this, we want to add a paragraph tag that is going to have some description to what our website does. So I'm going to say, discover details about every country around the world, put a dash, and then say from capitals to regions. So that generic thing you see people put on websites. And let's see how this is looking. Explore countries with real-time data, that's the title, and then this is the description. Now below this p tag, we do want to put the buttons that I was talking about. So let's add another div, and in this div, we're going to use a link. Now a link is basically the same thing as a navbar link, but it's a link that exists outside of a navbar. So I'm going to import this. Now we're going to treat this link as a button. So it's basically the same thing as a button, but we're making it a link so we can navigate when we click on it. So inside of it, we'll say something like explore now, so that when you click on it, it will take you to the countries tab. So let's say to, and then countries. Perfect. Then inside of this link, inside of this button, if you remember the demo, we did have an SVG inside of here. So I already have that SVG created. I'm just going to copy and paste. So if you want to use the same SVG, you can do so. It's an SVG from w3.org. Everyone can access it. So you can just put it here. And what we should see is this little arrow and the Explore Now button, which when we click will take us to the countries tab. Now we want to make the other button, which will also be a link, and that other button will be to the about page. So we'll say something like learn more, and we'll put the to property over here and send it to the about page. Perfect. Now let's go to the second section of this component, which is this div that we put as sibling to this whole section. And on this div, we want to add the image that is going to be displayed on the right side of the screen. So to make the UI look like that, we have to put another div inside of this and then just insert the image. Now the image, we're going to give a source to it, and I don't have the image downloaded here. I just grabbed a random image from Google. So you can use whatever image you want. More specifically, the image source that I want is this one over here. And we should see now that, yeah, everything is being displayed. Now it doesn't look good because we haven't added the CSS, but the good thing is we're pretty much finished this whole page. We just have to put the Tailwind class names and all of the UI will look great. So let's do that. I'm gonna copy and paste the CSS and I'll be back in a second. Perfect. As you can see, I added all the necessary CSS, and now if we go over here, you should see that we have a beautiful layout with the title, right? And here you can see the different colors in the title, which we made by using the different spans, the description, and the two buttons together with this image. Now, if I click on this button, it will take us to the countries tab. But if I click on learn more, it will take us to the about tab. Perfect. Now that we're done with the annoying and kind of boilerplate type part of our website, we can start building the part of our website that actually does some logic and requires some interesting code. So the part that I'm talking about is the countries tab. So inside of here, in this page, what we want to do is we want to make an API request to the API giving us the data about all of the different countries. And we want to receive a list of those countries. Now, later on, we're going to add other functionalities like being able to filter through them and group them depending on their continents. But for now, let's just make it such that we're able to fetch that data and console log it so we can actually make sure that we received the entire data. Now, this is the API that we're going to be using. It's called REST Countries. It's completely free, and I'll put the link for it in the description. When you make an API request to, for example, this route over here, which gives us all of the countries, we should get a list with a bunch of objects that contains information about this the list of countries. Now, if I prettify this, you can see that it looks a little bit better. It contains each country with a name, the official name for it, languages, if it's independent, it's capital, all that kind of stuff. But we're going to be using this data to be displayed in our website. Now to do that, let's go to our countries page over here. Let's fetch our data. If you want to fetch data inside of a route, specifically inside of before the component renders, then you want to use a predefined function from React Router version 7 called a loader. Now you might be familiar with loaders if you've ever worked with Remix in the past, because obviously React Router version 7 is a mix of Remix with React Router. And it inherited this notation of using this function called a loader function whenever you want to do things like load data from an API, both in a server way and in a client way. So what do I mean by that? Well, in our case over here, since we're going to be making a fetch request for our data in our client, we want to use a client loader. And the way we use it is by exporting an async function called client loader. Now this, using this name for the function and this notation and exporting it, will tell React Router version 7 that we want to turn this into a loader and make the data that we return from the fetching inside of here accessible inside of our component. So if you were actually rendering this on the server and you wanted to deal with either initial page loads or client navigation, you could also use a loader instead, which is the server equivalent to a client loader. But they're both similar and both works in very similar ways. In our case over here with the client loader, all we want to do is we want to fetch the data from our API and we want to return that data. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to say const res equals to await fetch, and we want to put here the URL for our API request. So this is our URL. Then below this, we're just going to destructure the data by sending it equal to res.json. And in the end, let's just return the data. Now with this, we're now able to get that data through the props of this component. The way we do this is by accessing the data through the route.component props. Now this route, it's not imported, so we do need to import from the country's type. So what you do is just import for the specific type definitions for this specific route, and it will have access to exactly the types you return from this data. Now we can just destructure the loader data, and now whatever we get from this, which for now let's just console log this, we'll see that will be the data that we get back from the API. So let's try this out. Let's console log this and let's just check out to see if this is working. Let's open up our console. We should see that because I refreshed a couple times, we got the console log of an array of 250 items, and each item in the array is exactly what you might expect, a country. So it means it's working. We are fetching the data and we are being able to access it inside of our countries component. Now let's display this data inside of our component. To do that, I'm going to create over here an unordered list, and this unordered list is going to loop through the loader data. So I'm going to say .map, and for each item in this loader data, we're going to get the country. Now the return from this is going to be a list item, and this list item is going to contain a couple things. First of all, let's also get the key from this and just pass it over here so that we can properly notify React about state updates. Then inside of here, we're going to have a link. Now this link is going to display the country name. So I'm going to say country.name.common, because that's how it's going to be structured in the data we receive. If you look here in our API request, the name.common gives us the name of the country. And as you can see, it is already working. We are getting indeed the names for each of the countries. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind is that we're using TypeScript here, and we don't know exactly the exact type of the data we're getting back unless we directly look here. And I'm not going to define an interface to give a specific type for this just to get type safety, because it would take a long time. So what I'm going to do is for the loader data that we're getting back here. So for this, I'm just going to make this an any type, and I'm just going to make this number probably. And then this should remove the issue with TypeScript. Now let's also put one thing below this. Let's put a div which is going to display the region in which this country is inside of. So we can get that by saying country.region. And then let's also put the population. So population is equal to country.population. Now I think those are the only good informant pieces of information that we can get from, at least in this part of the website where we're only trying to display each country like as a general sense, and then you click on it and then you go into a more in-depth explanation. But this looks pretty good. We're getting information about each of them and it looks pretty nice. Now obviously we're not filtering through anything, and also we're not grouping through region, which we'll add in a second. But one thing you might be wondering is, well, where are we going to go when we click on this link? Well, remember we have the country page over here, and this page, it accepts a parameter to it. If you look in our routes definition, its route is going to look like this. It's going to be /countries/Brazil, for example. So this is going to be represented by this parameter. So we want to keep track of that parameter in our country component. And when we get to building this component, we will be able to access that information. Now, when we navigate to that route, we do want to navigate to a route that is going to look like that. It's going to have countries and then / the name of the country. So when you click on the name of the country in this list, you want to navigate to the page for that country. And to do that, we're going to put a to property over here, and we're going to use backticks instead of normal quotation marks, because this will allow us to directly inject some JavaScript inside of here so that we can add the country.name.common. So that in this case, I'll open up the website again. If I want to go to the in-depth page about Switzerland, I can click on this and it will take me to countries/Switzerland page, which we'll then use to grab the information about Switzerland. So this is how we're going to make, and you can see it changes depending on which one we click. I can click on this one as well, and it will work. So that's pretty good. Now we want to add the logic for filtering and searching through the countries. Now to do that, we need to build over here some sort of UI that is going to allow us to have that input for searching and give us probably a title, because I feel like this page is kind of empty. So we probably want to put a title on the top saying something like, I don't know, let me put an h2 tag and say countries. And then below here, I want to put a div that is going to contain the form for searching and filtering through this list. So the first thing I want to put is an input. Now this input is going to be of type text, and it's going to have a placeholder which is going to say search by name. And then we're going to have to pass a value and an onChange function that is going to keep track of whatever the user is typing on this input. So to do that, we're going to have to create a state that is going to keep track of that. So let's do that. Let's create a state and set this equal to use state. Now it's going to be a string, and let's define the type here to be string. And let's call this search. And the function will be called setSearch. Now, when we are typing on this input, we'll pass an onChange that whenever there's any change to this input, we will basically just set the search equal to the event.target.value so that we can keep track of what the user is typing on that input. We also want to set the value of this input to be equal to the search state so that we can later on reset the form if we want to, and so on. Now we are able to indeed type here, but while I'm typing, nothing is happening. It's not filtering through them. So how do we write the logic for filtering it? Well, to do that, I'm going to actually create a variable that is going to depend on the loader data that we get back. And this variable is going to be called filtered countries. This is going to be equal to the loader data dot filter. And we can use this filter function from JavaScript to loop through this loader data and keep only certain. So the first thing I want to check is to see if this country that I'm currently looping and checking inside of the array matches the search. Now, the way we determine that is, first of all, if the search string is empty, because if it is empty, then every single country will match the search. Or if the country that we're currently looping through, if its name.common includes the word that we're currently typing on the input, so the search term. So that means that while we're typing on the input, this is going to check to see if for every country in this list, if there's a country that includes that specific search term, then we're going to determine that it is a match. So we do want to return true in that case. So we return this Boolean, which will be true only if search is empty or if that's the case. So we also want to make this an any, again, just for simplicity reasons. And this will allow us to do that. I'm going to, instead of using loader data now, I want to use the filtered countries array, because now it's going to actually give us a list that is filtered for the search term that we want. So let's check to see how it's working. You can already see that it's working because I had typed Brazil before. But as I type over here, it will start searching for the specific country that has the search term equal to this. However, there's a caveat to our code. For example, I wrote South over here. What if I put G for Georgia, but the G is not capitalized? Well, it's not recognizing. And the reason for that is because it is case sensitive, right? And in our comparison over here, we're checking to see if the name of the country, which is capitalized, includes the search term, which might be capitalized or might be not. So what we want to do is we want to compare them in their lowercase form. So I'm going to convert both of them to lowercase. You can convert them to uppercase as well if you want to. It doesn't matter, because what you want is just to make them both be either fully lowercase or fully uppercase. And you'll see now that it doesn't matter if I write G capitalized or G non-capitalized, it will still actually filter for the correct country. Great. Now we have the filtering working. The only thing we want left is for us to be able to add the option selection to determine which group or which region we want to select. So remember, we can be able to filter through the countries based on the name, but we also can group the countries and filter them based on region. So to do that, we want to come to our form over here, and after the input, we want to add a select. And the select will allow us to put a bunch of options inside of here. Now the options we want is, first of all, the most obvious one is just all regions. So the value will be empty, and we'll just say all regions. Then we want to put one for Africa, one for the Americas, one for Asia, one for Europe, and one for Oceania. So I'm going to do that right now. Let me add for Africa. Then I'll add for Americas, then Asia, then Europe, and then Oceania. And then finally over here, I'll just type the names of each region. So Africa, Americas, Asia, Europe, and then finally Oceania. Perfect. Now we should see that we have that select over here. Great. Now what do we do with the select? Well, we need to keep track of what the value of the select is. So we need to pass a value and an onChange similar to what we did over here. And we keep track of that in the same way. We're going to have a state for that. So I'm going to create another state, and let's call it region. And well, let's make this function set region. Now, to use this, we're going to come down to the select. We're going to give an unchange. Actually, I'll just copy this because we already have that logic here. And we'll just replace this with region and this with set region. And now we are keeping track of it. But the filtering is actually going to be very minimal. It's going to be similar to what we did over here. We're just going to add another matching boolean to see if the regions match. So inside of this filtering logic, we can check to see if the region of each specific country match the region that we selected in the select options. So actually, let's replace this with matches region. And we want to check for both things. We want to first check to see if the region is empty, because if it is, then again, we want to show every single country. And if it's not empty, we want to check to see if the country.region, and then we do the 2 lowercase, is equal to the region that we selected dot 2 lowercase. And now we're just comparing to see if the regions match. And in the end, we want to check to see, we want to keep the countries that both match the name search and the region selection. So we can come over here and we can see that we can select the regions, the countries based on their continents, and it will actually filter them. And then if I were to select one over here and then type, both the region filtering and the name filtering work together. For example, if I wanted to select here, I don't know, Europe and type UR, you see Uruguay doesn't appear, but Luxembourg appears because there's an UR inside of it. Perfect, we have that logic set in. So all we have to do left is just copy and paste the CSS again so that we can make this look cool. And as you can see, we now have the UI looking pretty nice. All of the countries are displaying in a nice orderly fashion, and all of the filtering still works, as you can see. But there's one thing I want to change before we move on from this page, which is the scenario in which actually I type something and nothing appears. I want to show some sort of UI for that. So to do that, we're going to come over here and we're going to check above our list to see if the filtered countries dot length, so dot length is equal to 0, because if it is, then we want to display a div saying that there were no countries match your filters, and then close the div. Then if that's not the case, then we want to just wrap all of this list around with this logic and close this off. So we're basically saying, is the list empty? So we couldn't find any filters. If so, display this UI. If not, display this. And you can see that that's what shows up. We now say no countries match your filters. Oh, actually I need to put an R to make sense. So now it actually shows everything. Now we're pretty much done with this page. Let's start working on the page for the individual country. So let's click on friends over here, and let's imagine we want to display here the little flag for the country together with some more in-depth information on the left. Well, to do that, we have to go to our country.tsx route and first of all deal with getting the name of the country from the URL. Now to do that, we're going to have to again create a client loader over here. So we're going to say export async function client loader, which will again serve to fetch the data from the API and return that data back to our component. Now in this public API, if you want to get information about one single country, you can do it like this. You can put the URL for the API, put /name, then / the name of the country, and then just put full text equals to true. So what we want is to again grab this param from the URL and insert that inside of the URL from this API request we're making. So let's copy this and let's go back to our component. And inside of here, we need to get that param by accessing the loader arguments inside of the arguments for this function. So we'll say route, and again, let's import for the correct component, which in this case is the country, and say dot loader args. And this will give us the params. Now, because the route types that are generated from React Router DOM are specific for each specific route, it already knows that this params object will contain the country name. So I can say const country name equal to params dot, and you can see that it already auto suggests country name because it generated that type from the definition that we created in our routes file. Perfect. Now let's come over here and let's check to see, we'll say const res is equal to await fetch, and let's use the API request that I put over here. Let's paste it inside of here. And we want to make this into backticks instead of quotation marks, again, because we want to insert some JavaScript. Then we'll just insert the country name inside of here. And we will, again, create the data object, set it equal to await res.json, and we'll return that data. Perfect. Now inside of here, let's just console log the data for now, which again, we're going to get from the arguments of this. So we'll say loader data, and we'll say route.component props like we did before, and we can just use the loader data inside of our console log. Now let's come over here. We are in the page with friends. Let's check to see if the data for friends was console logged, and it seems to have, because we have an array with one item, and that item is the information about friends. Great. Now we know that we're fetching the data correctly. Let's come back to this page and let's display that data. So to display that data, I want to actually create an object over here, which is going to be called country. Since we don't have the type exact, like the exact type like I was talking about, we want to create an object here that is going to represent that type. So for example, the country will contain information about the country that we want to display. And what information do we want? Well, let's display the name of the country, obviously. And we'll put here, how do we get that name? Which is going to be through the loader data. And since it's an array, we need to access the first item. And then say dot name dot common. And then if this is null, we do have to handle that case as well. Because if it's null, we'll say that it is not applicable. Now this is going to be a standard for all of the other types, so I'm just going to copy and paste. The second thing I want is an official name, because some countries have a normal name and an official name. So I'm going to replace this with official, and we're going to display that as well. Then we want to display the region, so I'm going to replace this with region, and I'll replace this whole thing with region. Then what else do we want to display? I think we need to display the subregion. I think that's something I also displayed on mine. So subregion, and we'll replace this as well. And I think the only ones left are capital, population, and the URL for the flag. So let's do capital, then copy and paste this here. Then we'll do population, and do the same here. And the flag URL, so we can get that image. And then I'll just say flags, and then we can actually access the PNG of the flag. Let's also put quotation marks on everything in case this information is null, because if that's the case, we don't want to break our entire app. So we want to deal with it, and if it's null, then it will default to the not applicable text. Perfect. Now that we have that information for the country, we can use that to be displaying it. Let's create here a div inside of this div. And inside of this div, let's put an h2 text that is going to contain the name of the country. And to access that, we just have to say country.name. Then inside of this, let's make a div that is going to contain the rest of the information. So I'll say P and then put here the official name. So I'll say official name is equal to, and then I'll put the country.official name. But one thing though, I do want to make this official name thing into a span so I can put some styling to it. So I'll also add a span inside of here. Now the rest of the information is going to be exactly like this. So I'm just going to copy and paste this multiple times and add the rest. So official name, what is the other one? It's going to be region and subregion. So let's change this to region and this to region as well. Then this to subregion and this to subregion as well. And then capital population. Perfect. Capital, and then we'll change this to capital, and the final one is population. So population, and then we'll change this to population. Now let's put the flag in our website. So below the second to last div, we want to check to see if the flag URL exists. So we'll say country.flag URL. If it's not null, then we want to display the div with an image inside of it. So I'm going to close this div and I'll put an image tag inside of it, which is going to contain a source, which is exactly the country.flag URL. Perfect. Now I just realized something with the flag URL, we don't want to default to not applicable. We want to default to just an empty string so we can actually check to see if it's null. And we should see now that all of that information should be displayed in our screen. Now it seems to be breaking, which if you watch my videos, you know I tend to like, because when things break, I can debug in the screen for you guys. So why is it breaking? It's saying uncaught error module console has been externalized. Let me check the code again. Did I do something wrong? Oh, I just realized I accidentally imported count from console, which makes no sense. I don't remember doing that. So that might have not even errored for you guys. But for me, it did. And when I just fixed it, you see, I get now this beautiful display of what the country France is. Now, we definitely want to make this look better. So I'm going to copy and paste the CSS. And be back in a second. Perfect. As you can see, we separated all the information. Now we have the flag on the right, the information about the country on the left, and it all looks great. Now, one thing I forgot to specifically point out is you might have noticed that when we get the data back for the population, it doesn't have the commas. It actually it's just a long number. Now, the way I'm putting the commas here is I just use the toLocalis string in the end, and this will convert that and add the correct commas, add the correct positions that would represent a real number. So now the only thing left to make is the about page, which, to be honest, you don't need to watch this because the about page is just pure UI. It doesn't have any logic to it. But if you want to stick around and watch it, this is how I'm going to do it. The basics of it is I'm just going to make a div inside of here. And this div is going to contain the h1 tag for the title of this page. So we're going to put an h1 tag saying about REST Explorer, which is the name of our website apparently. And below this h1 tag, I'm going to put probably a paragraph tag. Yeah. And then we'll say this website uses then I'm going to use a span to specify the API we're using. I mean, if you're building a real website, you probably want to put information about your company here. But in my case, I'm literally just explaining that I built this with this API. So I'm going to say to display comprehensive information about countries from around the world.
Now, I think I'll still put a paragraph tag over here, but I'm not going to show myself writing at all. I'll just copy and paste it. I actually opted to paste 2 things. So we have 3 paragraphs in total. You should see that your page should be looking like this if you go to the About page. Everything seems to be mushed together, but with the styling that I'm going to paste right now, it will make it look a little bit better. And as you can see, the UI looks definitely a lot better. This is the CSS that I wrote. And if you want to stop and just copy or copy from the code, feel free to do so as well. But this is basically it for the project. I hope you were able to learn a lot about how to set up your React Router version 7 project, how to work with fetching data in it, how to work with different routes, and how to build this simple but really cool project. I wanted to make this project because I think there isn't a lot of videos out there on React Router version 7 specifically. I think there's like a couple, including mine that I released recently, which is a more in-depth crash course on everything related to the library. So if you want to check that out, feel free to do so. But also there isn't any videos out there on showing how to build a project that you don't have to build the backend yourself. You're using a public API whilst still making it look pretty cool, which I intended to do with a UI, and I intended to do with all of this filtering logic. So if you enjoy this project, please leave a like and comment down below what you want to see next. Subscribe because I'm posting 2 times a week, and I would massively appreciate if you could help support the channel. I'm putting a lot of effort into this channel this year, so if you guys could really support me, that would be amazing, and I would be eternally grateful for that. Now, if you want to check out the code, again, it will all be in the description together with a text version of this tutorial in my blog, PedroTech.co. Also, if you want to join my newsletter, that's PedroTech.co/newsletter. And yeah, that's basically it. Really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.